islands falling, they're just perfectly beautiful. So, hello everyone, and a very warm, eco-friendly welcome to our first parallel session of CILIPS 22. My name's Kirsten, I'm Membership Officer for CILIPS Scotland, and thank you so much for joining us on what is sure to be an inspiring sustainability discussion. So we had a fantastic introduction from Kate already highlighting the Green Libraries project, CILIPS Go Green, which hopefully some of you are already familiar with. It's a programme that began in the build-up to COP26, and it continues to go from strength to strength, showing examples of best practice from across the sector and beyond, including several of the organisations that we're delighted to be hearing a little more from today. So we're going to start off with a discussion amongst ourselves, and then we will open the floor up to questions, so get those green thinking caps on. With so much to share, I think we'll go straight into introducing our panel. So we're delighted to have with us Dr. Emily Munro from the National Library of Scotland Moving Image Archive, Alison Nolan from Inverclyde Libraries, Cathy Hopkin from Julie's Bicycle, and Christina Riley from the Nature Library. So thank you so much all for joining us. It's such a treat to have you all together. I wonder if we could begin with each of you perhaps taking a minute or two to introduce yourselves and your organisations, perhaps with a mention of how libraries and sustainability first became connected with you. Maybe Emily, we start with you.
I knew you were going to start with me. That was just the way you were looking.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for coming along to this session. I'm a curator of moving image at the National Library, so I work within a library, but I guess I don't really see myself as a librarian, but I'm a very passionate supporter and long-term user of public libraries. I'm here, I guess, because I made a film last year called Living Proof, and Living Proof was an attempt to kind of grapple with our culpability in terms of climate change in Scotland by looking at the past. So I was using archive footage to tell that story. And the film, you know, it was touch and go, we have to say, with the pandemic, whether it was going to get completed and how it was going to be shown. But I'm glad to say that we did complete it and managed to screen it to audiences across Scotland and further afield as well. So it's been touring, and most of the screenings of Living Proof took place in November, coinciding with COP26. So in one way, like how I first connected libraries and sustainability would be through that project, quite explicitly thinking about the library collection and how we could use that to speak with people about the things that concerned them about the environment. But I guess I'm also interested in that term sustainability in a different way. So in terms of thinking about longevity, and someone earlier on mentioned, you know, the sustainable workforce, and you know, to have a diverse workforce, you need that sustainability, you need that longevity. But I think also, you know, libraries, you know, we're there because we want to be able to sustain a memory. So it's that thing of, you know, preserving the memory, but also aiding memory or enabling memory and forming memories as well. So those connections I think are really important. And as someone who finds a lot of solace in my public library, I guess I wanted to kind of emphasize that, you know, the importance of libraries being there in the future.
Oh, well, sustaining a memory, that's just so beautiful, and it chimes with the whole theme of the conference as well, so thank you. Yeah, and if we could come to you, Alison, because I think when we mentioned COP26, Inverclyde have a very special relationship with COP26, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. We were very lucky to be one of the climate beacons, which were chosen by Creative Carbon Scotland on the run-up to COP26. So as a library service, we looked at how we could spark and engage community conversations around the idea of climate change as well. And I think, you know, as a library service, we've always been really interested in the Green Library movement. You know, it's really hard not to just turn on the TV or look at a newspaper and see how green and sustainable practices are being implemented across the board as well. So I think a lot kind of came together for us being a climate beacon as well. So we both looked inwardly at what we were doing as a library service, but also externally to see what we could offer our community as well. So a lot of things kind of led this. It was almost like a growing movement towards it. Pre-pandemic, we were very lucky to have explored developing libraries as cultural hubs. And we did quite a bit of evaluation after that, and we discovered, like, from our communities that what made a library a valuable cultural hub was how we tapped into the spirit of the community by assessing their priorities and providing resources to support the things that were deemed the most important. So then the pandemic hit, and we could see, you know, our communities needed us more. And I know we mentioned libraries being at the heart of communities, and we thought, well, what can we do to harness this community spirit that has become, you know, so prominent, and, you know, it really came out through the pandemic as well. And we thought, again, you know, there's such an interest in climate action, green libraries. I think we could move this forward as well. So that's where we came from it.
It's amazing. And I think that idea of community, yeah, we've got two amongst four, not too bad. Kathy, I think that really taps into some of the work that Julie's Bicycle do. We've had a brief introduction to you already, but perhaps you could share some insights as well.
Sure. So hello everyone, my name's Kathy. So I work for an organisation called Julie's Bicycle, and we're a not-for-profit that was founded 15 years ago now, so back in 2007. And we work to mobilise the arts and culture sector to act on the climate and ecological crisis. So within Julie's Bicycle, I'm part of the Creative Green Consultancy team, and I specialise in working with galleries and museums. So for me, sort of the link with sustainability, there's lots of crossover between libraries and museums. So, you know, the purpose of these sort of organisations is being there to educate us, being there to inform us, to help us grow our understanding, and to widen our perspectives of the world. So really, libraries and similar organisations, I think, have a duty to inform their communities about the climate and ecological crisis, and to help people take action, as well as those institutions taking action themselves. And libraries themselves are a really important driving force for change, and their services have a huge reach, and can reach beyond sort of the usual green suspects. So yeah, really a key role to play in helping people understand and act on the climate crisis. And another link for me, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, circular economy and moving away from sort of fast fashion and buying, you know, lots of consumables. Libraries are the ultimate, you know, reuse. The very model is, you know, you borrow something and you give it back and someone else can use it, and not everyone is sort of buying something for themselves. So really, sustainability has always sat at the heart of libraries in that sense.
I love that. And speaking of which, Christina, maybe you could introduce us to the Nature Library now for anyone that hasn't had the privilege of bumping into you in the exhibition hall yet.
Yeah, we've got a very mini nature library in the hall. But yeah, so the Nature Library, it's a collection of books that alternate to the landscape, nature. It's very broad, because the more I was reading these books, the more I realized, like, there are just so many connections that it goes beyond what you would find in the nature section of, say, a bookshop or something. So it started, my background is actually as a photographer, and I was being asked kind of, oh, what inspires the work that you do, and particularly what books and what literature inspires the work that you do. And I realized that reading these nature writing landscape books were hugely impacting what I was making as an artist, but then also just how I was living, like, my day-to-day life. So I thought, well, I would get to kind of start recommending books to people and writing about them in different ways. And then I thought, oh, it would just be nice to put these all in one place and everyone can look at them. so yeah, so I started just sharing what I loved, which is also not only were they teaching me all these different things, they are just beautiful books to read. And I think for me, a lot of nonfiction and these kind of books, nonfiction, teach you so much about what you don't know. And they're so fascinating that I always think it feels like fiction as well. And there are also lots of fiction books in there. So I think for me, the connection between sustainability and the climate and libraries was kind of already went hand in hand. I remember I first read Rachel Carson's The Sea Around Us in the Mitchell Library. It was like a reference copy, so I was sat there. So it kind of, that's I guess like where it first started, and like starting to get out these books and start to go into that that genre. But yeah, kind of like what Kathy was saying there, it's really important, I think, for art and culture. For me, it's that other route into learning about sustainability and the climate that's beyond certain scientific ends where it can be a bit hard to grasp. So just everyone needs ways of understanding it, and that was books for me.
Yeah. It's amazing, and you're clearly, it strikes me that very often pursuing the similar, even the same goals, but in really creative, really individual ways. I wonder if any of you have any thoughts on when we're looking to, or there's a necessity to create change and encourage change. Is that driven top down? Is it bottom up? Or are there ways in which we can somehow combine the two? Kathy, maybe I'll turn to you. Yeah, I won't pick on you again, Emily.
I think a combination of both is really, really important, and I think one can inspire the other, and where it's most effective, they kind of meet in the middle. Top down is really important to get buy-in from the whole organisation. It enables sustainability to be really embedded into the values of an organisation, and it also means that there's resources and financial backing available should that be needed. But bottom up is also really important to really engage with the communities that you're based within. So yeah, I think it really needs both. Just wanted to talk a little bit about green teams. So green teams being created within organisations really enables that sort of input from all levels of an organisation, from the senior management team right through to people that might volunteer at an organisation one day a week, and allows everyone to feed in their ideas and creativity sort of on an equal level, and really get support and buy-in across the whole span of the organisation.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think Julie's bicycle are so integral to that happening in CILIP as well, with our own green team. Hopefully all of us are part of a green team and green libraries themselves. I'm wondering if there's a particular example then of your work that really exemplifies that. If I could maybe come to you, Alison, because I know that Inverclyde have done just such a diverse range of activities as part of the Climate Beacon. Is there anything that you think really just typifies this unique role that libraries can play?
Well, I actually think it's the role that public libraries play to convene and encourage action. And I think, as you've said, Christina, about the Nature Library, what we do best is we encourage people to read and to look at different, spark conversations through what they're reading. We invited authors to come and speak: Alistair McIntosh, Leslie Riddoch, Lindsay Littleton, Samuel Tongue, the poet as well, to just encourage that, movement and thought processes around climate change as well. We also offer our communities a safe space, and I think that's really important. We often say libraries, are about the space and the people that are within that space as well. And we also, as a Climate Beacon, tapped into our current programming. We have chatty cafes around lots of interesting topics. We have a gardening cafe, but we decided to expand a little bit further. So we had a chat and change cafe, which was great. And what we did was we invited local groups that were involved in climate-related, areas to come and speak to members of the community that wanted to come along and have a cup of tea and have a chat about the issues that were important to them. And that went went down really well, and it really sparked people to do more. You know, we've an amazing group in Inverclyde called the Literati group, and they do litter picks around Inverclyde. And a lot of the people who came to our charity cafe got involved with them. We've got Belleville Community Garden. We're starting our own community garden, the Drying Green. So this ability to come to a safe space and chat about what's important to you, I think, is what libraries do really well.
Yeah, who comes up with these names? They're wonderful. Literati, that belongs on CILIP's Twitter for sure. And that Chat and Change, that's hopefully what we're kind of doing today as well. Yeah, Emily, go ahead.
Just wanted to add something about that idea of a safe space, actually, and particularly in terms of a climate and biodiversity emergency. Examples that I'd been thinking of were actually, you know, not within Scotland, but in other countries where libraries are actually used as kind of crisis points. And, you know, for example, in the United States, where there's heat waves and people can't afford air conditioning, going into the public libraries to be able to have some respite. Or in Australia, where when there's bushfires, public libraries are used as crisis points, emergency centres for people to go, where they can charge their phones, where they can access information. Hurricanes, a similar idea. So although we don't have those kind of, you know, extreme weather emergencies hitting us all the time, I suppose what's interesting about a public library is that it is a really equitable space, or it should be an equitable space, where people can access information in ways that are appropriate to them and that they can be assisted to do that. And I think that's really important. You know, one of the things that I've been interested in recent years has been exploring climate grief and climate anxiety. And there was actually an article published in The Lancet, the medical journal, The Lancet, last year, which was about climate grief and saying, you know, actually as we move forward, we really need urgently to be providing spaces for people to come together and to talk about their grief and to talk about what that feels like. And it's partly a grief. We're grieving the loss of modernity, as well as grieving the loss of multiple species. It's not something you know, generations haven't faced this before. We don't necessarily have the vocabulary to be able to express ourselves. You know, I think that's really interesting about the Nature Library too. I do a creative writing workshop around climate grief and using Rachel Carson's work as a kind of like touchstone for that. You know, those kind of ways of finding a means of expression are really important, because there's so much information out there and it's very hard to process and it's very anxiety inducing actually. But it's not just the information, it's the loss. There's a word that's been used in recent years called solastalgia. I don't know if people have heard that word before. So we talk about nostalgia when we're talking about memory institutions and, you know, using nostalgia. But solastalgia was a word that it was first coined by this guy called Glenn Albrecht. But it describes the feelings of grief over the loss of an environment or the loss of a homeland. So people, particularly in the global south, are experiencing this very strongly, you know, the loss of their natural environment, habitats. Indigenous peoples have experienced this for generations. And we're now starting to experience it here as well. And I think I want to include in that idea of transition as well, you know, the idea of just transition from kind of fossil fuel oriented industries away from that. You know, there's a generation that are experiencing loss because of you know, waves of change and unemployment and the lack of a just transition. So there's a whole load of things that come together around this safe space.
Yeah, oh, that's so powerful, nostalgia. It's so moving and evocative. It's such a fascinating concept. It strikes me as we're speaking that libraries then function as a physical safe space, but also an intellectual safe space in terms of certainly tackling misinformation about the kind of stark reality of the climate crisis that we're facing. I wonder, Christine, is that something that's come across with the nature library, the way that people are responding to the books and they can encounter them in this space that you create?
Yeah, I think misinformation and information in general is where like libraries just have that. Again, it's one of the few, like Kate was saying, libraries don't always have tangible benefits, or like you don't see what they're doing, but apart from like having a safe space, that is something that's there. But just the thing that goes on in the background of deciding, like something I found really interesting is the kind of quality control checks almost. So like if I get a new book, and especially when you get books that are described as like of their time, and you're reading through it just to be like, well, I need to, you want to make sure that it's not racist or homophobic or saying these like certain, anything that is harmful or like misinformation, just wrong essentially. So going through that and just learning how you decide, because I think the first thing that confused me, because I should say that I'm not a library professional and I just love reading, and this is how I've pulled these together. So learning the responsibility you have of curating what information you're putting out there, because if you're a library, you're essentially deciding what people read, and that's huge. And I think what I found interesting is looking at other books and acknowledging that one book might be, just because a book was important 50 years ago doesn't mean it is now. And when you start reading and you start thinking of all the books that have been written in those 50 years, like what else could be on the shelf? Because sadly, we can't fit all of the books in our libraries. We have limited space. So I think they constantly need to be these like changing and refreshing things. And for the climate, when it comes to that subject, even more so, because everything's changing really quickly. So I recently read Naomi Klein's This Changes Everything, and it was written in 2014, I think. And just through that, I was like, well, is this still the case? Or what happened with this oil rate? Like what's going on? Because you just know that it's changing so often. But yeah, I think just constantly looking at what you're putting out there and choosing, and I think that's the fun of it as well. That's why we do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I do it, yeah.
It's a privilege and a pleasure, definitely. And I think that speaks to another theme that I was hoping we could touch on. Certainly, you're an all-women panel. Your suffragette cards will have given you a slight cute clue today that feminism, winspiration is very important to CILIPS. And I mean, you touched earlier, Emily, on the fact that climate change very much disproportionately affects the communities in the global south, disproportionately affects women and girls. Do any of you have any thoughts on how libraries can contribute to this kind of broader social justice that seems to be required to actually generate real solutions? I know that's something that Julie's Bicycle are really going to be focusing on with the green libraries as well, aren't they, Kathy?
Yeah, and like you say, the climate crisis and sort of social inequalities are very much linked, and those people experiencing the worst effects of climate change are people that are already living in poverty, are already marginalised, are predominantly women, of people of colour. So looking at social justice issues and climate change are, you can't look at them in isolation. They have to be considered together. And if you're familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, then those, do sort of span both of those things. So it's really important not just to understand the science of climate change and not just to think about the environmental effects that it will have, but to also think about the effects that it has, that it will have on different communities around the world, and think about the solutions accordingly as well, the different needs of different people. Just to do a really shameless plug, Julie's Bicycle have just launched a Climate Justice Hub on our website. So if it is something that you would like to find out more about, there's loads of resources there. So yeah, we recognise that it was an issue that people need to be talking about, and people need to sort of have access to information about. So yeah, we've in the process of adding more and more resources to that hub. Yeah, so take a look.
Sounds amazing. It will be appearing on CILIPS Go Green very soon, I can tell you. Emily, were you going to come in?
Yeah, if that's okay. This is when we start getting a bit political, right, isn't it?
Go for it.
And it's something that, as a curator who works within a national institution, I'm quite aware of, you know, when I put out a film that was about the climate crisis and was explicitly anti-capitalist. But I have to say, you know, as people who work within institutions, you know, we are serving the public, but we're also part of society as well. And we are in a place now where, you know, my personal feeling is that I would rather be much more open about my politics and about what I see as the potential solutions than to pretend that that's not an issue. You know, capitalist patriarchy has really only served the very rich very well. And, you know, we continue to exploit the global south. And I guess, you know, it's not always comfortable territory for libraries. You want to kind of feel like you're providing information in a neutral way. But actually, as we know, archives are not neutral, museums are not neutral, libraries are not neutral either. And we need to be wary that, you know, climate action does not necessarily mean social justice. So, you know, a lot of the solutions to the climate crisis, if there is a solution, that are being proposed, are being, you know, they're capitalist solutions. And I think that's can be confusing for people as well, just to kind of get to the roots of like what's actually going on here. Well, surely we're all going to be running electric vehicles and it's all going to be fine, and the planes are going to be running off, I don't know, some biofuel, and it's all going to work out. But it's just not that simple, you know, unless we get away from this idea of a growth economy. How on earth are we going to, you know, create a more kind of balanced, equitable environment for all species? And also kind of coming to grips with the fact that, you know, the oil companies that are proposing themselves as part of the solution to the climate crisis are perpetrators of climate and environmental crimes, continue to be so. There was something on the radio this morning about Los Angeles, a city of 10 million people. 3 million people who live in Los Angeles are living in very dangerous, polluted conditions because they live very close to oil extraction farms. And you know, this is in the so-called most advanced capitalist, you know, nation in the world. Yeah, I think that kind of your social justice and climate justice going together is very important. But I think as librarians, not to be scared of being explicitly political about that, you know. And I can see it in my local library. I love the books that they've been choosing very carefully and putting out. You know, I love that. You know, I love the idea of the kind of stagehand, like, you know, it's like there it is. But I know it's hard. I know it's hard when you're working within local authorities, you know, and you're like, you want to toe the line or whatever. But, you know, don't be scared to be more explicit, and don't be worried about having those conversations with people, particularly within your own organisation.
The myth of the neutral, whether that's a collection, whether that's a catalogue, I think that's at the forefront of many of our minds. Are you going to come in, Christina?
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. Like, the more that you read about what's going on, you can't fight the climate crisis without also fighting the patriarchal system and the capitalist system, which has really, I mean, it's a system that has failed, I suppose. Like, again, like, to get a little political, but like, I think a lot of times you hear like, oh, it's a people problem, and like humans have done this, but I don't think it is. Like, I think as a whole, people are good. Like, we build libraries, and we love, and we make music. People are good, but we have built this system which really, as you said, only helps. It's been built by and benefits a minuscule population of the Earth, especially when you take into account the other non-human inhabitants of Earth. So yeah, I think absolutely reading people like Rachel Carson again, Vandana Shiva, Naomi Klein, that book again, has taught me a lot about just the way that this has, how this has come to pass, really. And then once you learn that, you can kind of see how it can be unpicked. But yeah, I mean, women are still, it's 2022 and they're still being silenced, and you have to ask why. And I think libraries are a place where like it opens up those conversations, and that's just still so necessary. So, yeah.
Beautifully put. Everyone wave your protest and suffragette cards together. Ali. Yeah.
And just to add to that as well, there was a UN 2019 study that found that national governments with more women pass more stringent climate policies. So, but it also showed that 80% of people displaced by climate change are women, you know, due to, you know, the global areas in the global south as well. So there's a lot that needs to be done, you know, with access to quality education and gender responsive policy measures as well. So I think, yeah, we all have a role to play and get our voices heard out there so that change can happen.
The stats speak for themselves on that occasion, I think. So I'm conscious of time, and there's obviously a lot of food for thought there. Do we have any audience questions at the moment? Oh, yeah, we've got a couple over at this end. Thanks, Alice. So many mics in circulation.
Hello, Lindsay McCrell from Stirling Council Libraries. I just wondered if it's an opportunity for Alison perhaps to talk about the great success that she and Slick had recently when they went down to for a competitive process to bid for funding from John Lewis Partnership, which resulted in funding being awarded for Linden Mend hubs in Scottish libraries, which is a very exciting project.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, I was going to mention that actually as something exciting that's coming up in the future as well. Like, so I was lucky enough to be part of the panel with Lindsay and Marion from Slick as well, to go down and pitch for the John Lewis £1 million Circular Futures Fund, which will fund a network of 10 Lend and Mend hubs in public libraries across Scotland, which is coming in the future. You'll have seen the advert for the project officer, and I think the application process is open as well to that just now as well. But it just shows you as well the role that libraries have in, you know, looking to the circular future as well. You know, as we mentioned earlier, we're green by our very nature as well, and by expanding our collections, you know, to other items, things that can be used by the community, you know, things aren't getting easier. We're heading towards a cost of living crisis, so being able to come to a library space and use a sewing machine or pick up a tool that you need at home is really important as well. So I think we do need to look at that as well. And I think what's wonderful as well is in the new public library strategy forward, there is such a strong focus on sustainability as well, and we're also, all the themes are matched to the sustainable goals as well, which is good. We can show what we do best, you know, which is providing that space for people to come and use.
Amazing. I think that speaks really well to the research fund that we launched today as well, one of the, you know, the key themes that we're looking at that. So thank you. I think we had another question. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Namone from Western Isles Libraries. Sorry, this is a very, very needy question to Dr. Emily. I'm working with a community group to develop a climate action plan. And I'm just wondering, is it still possible to get copies of living proof to sort of screen and sort of, you know, encourage conversation?
Let's have a chat later on. Yeah, it's officially over its license period, but I'm sure we can work something out.
That's what the in-person event is all about, these kind of connections. Thank you. Do we have any other questions at the moment? Yeah, great, thank you.
Probably got a loud enough voice to shout it. Just to ask out of interest, if you all had one thing that you wanted us to take away today and do tomorrow, what would that be? And what would you want us to stop doing tomorrow?
Oh, great. That was on my list, so I have to cross that out. That's wonderful. Great. Anyone want to kick us off with that? Thanks, Christina.
I always say read Rachel Carson is like that's the one that changed it for me. What to stop doing though? I don't, that's a hard one. I'll maybe think about it and come back, but read Rachel Carson. Yeah.
One thing I would say to do is to engage with the local communities, engage with your users, and find out what's really important to them, particularly if it's local issues. So often sort of starting a conversation about local air quality or something like that can then lead to wider discussions about sort of other environmental impacts. So yeah, that's a sort of key thing, to really find out what's at the heart of your community and what's important to them. One thing to stop doing, that's quite a difficult one. Yeah, I think I will have to come back to that as well.
Okay, I would agree as well. I think collaborate, build those partnerships within your communities. I think that's really, really important. And start small, because every little change is going to make a huge difference, you know. I think we have a big role to play, libraries, as leaders in environmental sustainability, and I think we all have the potential to inspire communities into more, environmentally sustainable ways of action. So we can lead by example, you know. So it's very easy to do it, and I would agree the Green Team is a great opportunity as well within your service, and from all levels within your service. You can get people who are interested and passionate about it to come, because they'll spark different ideas of things to do as well. Yeah, it's really hard to actually decide what to stop doing, because we could all say, oh, let's, you know, stop single-use plastics, and all these little things do add up eventually. But I think you probably have to just engage with your community and see what's needed first, and then make the decision from there.
Yeah, it's really hard to think about what to, because you're all such nice people as well. I don't want to say you should stop doing stuff. I think just keep it on the agenda. You know, libraries, you're not the media. You don't have to kind of go, you'd think that the climate crisis was over, you know. There was so much attention in you know, October, November, and then, you know, we're on to the next big story. And, you know, you don't need to act like the media. You can keep up interesting things anyway. Keep refreshing the books. Look for creative ways to engage with your community as well. It doesn't always have to be the scary stuff, you know. That's the stuff that can push people away, but it can be the stuff that brings people together. You know, connecting with like-minded organisations, local charities that are working on biodiversity projects, for example. And actually, I think, you know, children's sections and children's books are a really good way to get not just kids but adults on board. There's some amazing kids books out there right now that, you know, deal with climate action and talk about, you know, science and biodiversity and evolution, and they're really good kind of gateway, I think, for adults kind of who want to maybe engage with some of the issues but are feeling overwhelmed by things too. So there's so much you can do, I would say. So much you could do.
Great. Christina, did you think of something for us to stop?
Yeah, well, because I was like, maybe just stop doing what I just did, which is only sharing stories by people who look like you. So just like share more voices, different countries, different backgrounds. Just a library is the opportunity to share the entire world. So like, I think we just need to use that. So yeah, that would be mine.
That is a fantastic note. Now, I think we've only got a couple of minutes left. You're giving me the thumbs up, Sean, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, panel. I've learned so much. I think the connection between libraries and sustainability, it's so strong. It's also so deep. You can see the meaning of sustainability itself is going in really exciting directions. And librarians, if I could say one thing to stop, it would be just stop doubting yourselves. If anyone out there is thinking you're not making a difference, library professionals are absolute change makers in this area and everywhere. So I think that's really come across so strongly. Thank you so much to you all. Can we give a big round of applause to our panel? So we're now going to have a short and sweet 5-minute break before we head off to some more parallel sessions. You might be staying here, might be going upstairs, but thanks so much for fantastic questions, and thank you so much for those contributions. We really appreciate it. Thanks all.